to the best of your knowledge, do you know if the Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, is traveling with a business delegation also?
Indeed, business delegation from both sides are accompanying the respective leaders to Ahmadabad. Remember, tomorrow, one of the last official engagements here for both Prime Ministers would be a business forum meeting where the chambers of commerce from both countries, India and Japan, will be in attendance to chalk out a future roadmap of cooperation and investments in each other's countries, Japanese investments in India and Indian investments in Japan. And that, to my mind, the public-private participation will be a key element of those discussions here in the business plenary that both leaders will co-chair tomorrow here in Ahmedabad.
And Ramesh, other than nuclear energy, we were talking in the morning about the interest that India has in amphibious technologies when it comes to the defense sector. So that's going to be another very important point of talk, isn't it?
Absolutely. When we talk about India-Japan cooperation or collaboration in the vast Indo-Pacific region, Daniele, defense cannot be missed in this dynamic. And to that extent, India is interested in buying military hardware from Japan. The amphibious aircraft, the Shinmeva, worth billions of American dollars. So clearly, that is another key defense procurement item on the agenda of Prime Minister Modi when he sits down for delegation-level talks with Prime Minister Abe here in Ahmedabad tomorrow afternoon. And to my mind, defense is a key element of the overarching security dialogue between the two countries. Remember, India and Japan have a 2+2 mechanism where the foreign and defense ministers of Japan meet regularly. And we've also seen similar dialogue now being restarted with the U.S. under the Trump administration, which is in succession to the strategic and commercial dialogue which was in vogue under the Obama tenure. So clearly, the trilateral cooperation and collaboration between and among India, Japan and the U.S. will also be something that both countries will be keenly aware of and be looking to cement in the months to come.
And the two Prime Ministers will also launch the Asia-Africa Economic Corridor. Could you please explain for the benefit of our viewers what does it mean?
Indeed, Daniele, for the benefit of viewers who might not be familiar with the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, now the history of the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor is simple. It is an idea which India and Japan have mooted and are considering even as we speak. Remember, India and Japan partnership extends to third countries, in this case to the continent of Africa, and many people around the world see the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor as a counter or a rival to China's Belt and Road Initiative. And just to cut across to the picture that I'm seeing right now, Daniele, I can see the motorcade of the two Prime Ministers make their way from the airport to the square where I am stationed at the moment. And this is a roadshow which will carry them from all the way from the airport along our 8-kilometer route to the Sabarmati Ashram, which was made famous by Mahatma Gandhi, which will be the first official engagement of Prime Minister Abe's talks here in Ahmedabad. And I can see the cavalcade of Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Abe as we speak make its way from the airport to the square where I am stationed at the moment. And crowds are cheering both leaders as they make their way to the first official engagement at the Sabarmati Ashram. There's a lot of a good turnout here in Ahmedabad, where the square where I am at the moment. And we can see cheers, and we can see placards and banners and posters held up by the crowds, especially those people on the rooftops where I can see from my vantage. All the rooftops have been occupied by onlookers, young boys, young children, all lining the skyline as I speak in anticipation of greeting the two dignitaries. But just to come back to the question which you posed, Daniele, as I said, this will be a key point of discussion between the two leaders when they indeed meet here tomorrow, including other bilateral, regional and global issues of mutual concern.
Ramesh, it is now Archer taking over. Let me stay with you on this story. Live visuals there, taking a look at what is happening on the ground there. Certainly a huge event, a huge spectacle there with people holding up the flags of both countries, both India and Japan. Ramesh, let's also get perspective on this bullet train, which is high on the agenda. How significant that could be if that were to take off, perhaps expanding to other parts. Right now, we understand that this is a huge talking point between Modi and Shinzo Abe.
Absolutely, Archit. The highlight of Prime Minister Abe's two-day visit here in Ahmedabad will be indeed the laying of the foundation stone tomorrow morning for the high-speed railway project, the railway corridor that will link Ahmedabad in Gujarat with Mumbai in the neighboring state of Maharashtra. Now, this will be a first-of-its-kind project in India's transportation history. Remember, the high-speed railway projects involve trains which run at a speed of more than 250 kilometers per hour, and the Shinkansen technology perfected by Japan has trains running in excess of 300 kilometers per hour. So clearly, this is one item or one idea that India would like to replicate as well in the Indian context, and the Ahmedabad-Mumbai high-speed rail corridor is being seen as a template for similar projects elsewhere in the country, linking the other metropolitan cities, namely Kolkata, Delhi and Chennai. So clearly, a lot of interest among local population here as well to this high-speed rail corridor project. Remember, Japan is only one of 15 countries in the world today that have this technology and have mastered it, as it were, and India will look to harness that technology with help of Japan. Remember, Japan is contributing or funding nearly 80% of the estimated cost of the project of setting up this Ahmedabad-Mumbai high-speed railway corridor. But the benefits are there for all to see, Archit. At the moment, the 500-odd kilometer distance between Ahmedabad and Mumbai takes about 6 or 7 hours by train. But when bullet train becomes a reality here, it will reduce the travel time between the two cities to a little more than 2 hours. So clearly, India is hard selling this idea as one which will give a lot of spin-offs in terms of spurring economic growth, in terms of creating almost 30,000 new jobs, and also helping farmers move their agricultural produce in very quickly between the two states of Gujarat and Maharashtra. So clearly, India looks at this ambitious road project with a lot of hope, and it remains to be seen how it eventually translates on the ground and links other Indian cities going forward as well.
Absolutely. Ramesh, you hit up a very good point. It could really cut the travel time by about a half. Instead of 6 hours, about 2 to 3 hours. We understand that this project should be ready by 2022. How likely, if this is a success or a hit, could this expand to other parts of the country as well, modeling after Japan's bullet train, if the Mumbai-Ahmedabad Bullet Express does pick up with customers?
That's right, Archie. The original idea was to complete the project by 2023, but the year 2022 has a salience of its own in India's context. Remember, 2022 will mark the 75th anniversary of India's independence, and the government of Prime Minister Modi wants this project, the high-speed railway corridor between Ahmedabad and Mumbai, to become a reality by the 15th of August of 2022. And we are given to understand that both sides are working towards meeting that deadline. And tomorrow morning, we'll see the work officially begin with the groundbreaking ceremony here in Ahmedabad near the Sabarmati railway station, not far from where I am at the moment, where both Prime Ministers Abe and Prime Minister Modi, will jointly lay the foundation stone of the high-speed railway corridor project that will link Ahmedabad and Mumbai.
Ramesh, let's also talk about the fact that it's in Gujarat and the red carpet, of course, Modi's home state, rolling out the big guns, the red carpet for Shinzo Abe. Let's get perspective on that. How will this relationship between Modi and Shinzo Abe really improve or play a role when it comes to trade between India and Japan?
Well, clearly, Archit, the India-Japan relation is important not only for India and Japan themselves, but they also come as a factor of stability in the wider Indo-Pacific region and beyond. Now, we know and we've seen it before that Prime Minister Modi has a tendency or a propensity to establish a personal rapport with world leaders. including but not limited to the much talked about hugs that he gives his interlocutors in various parts of the world. And we saw that again, a glimpse of that here at the Ahmadabad airport just moments ago, when Prime Minister Modi gave a warm hug to Prime Minister Abe soon after his aircraft landed here. So clearly, a lot at stake for Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Abe, as well as for India and Japan, especially in the regional and global context. Remember, both India and Japan are members of the G4 group, which comprises Germany and Brazil. And all four countries are trying to reform the UN Security Council to have a permanent seat for themselves at the high table. So a lot of things at stake for both India and Japan, especially in the bilateral, regional and global context.
Well, right now, Ramesh, stay with us. We're also taking a live look at some of the visuals coming in. Both Prime Minister Modi and Shinzo Abe at the Sabarmati Ashram there in Ahmadabad, taking a tour there of the ashram as we speak. We saw moments ago, not too long ago, after the landing, the two leaders, in fact, embraced a warm hug. We see both of them, Shinzo Abe, as well as his wife there in traditional ethnic wear as well. Ramesh, let me bring you back to the conversation. How will this meet perhaps play a role with some of India's neighbors on how they view this relationship or this bond of strength between India and Japan? For example, China, who certainly is cautiously watching this meet.
Absolutely, Archit. India saw this relationship with Japan as a special, strategic and global partnership. And that, to my mind, would be self-explanatory in that there is not only a bilateral and regional dimension to the relationship, but also a global imperative that drives both their countries and their economies and their respective foreign and security policies. Now, we see that manifest itself in the wider Indo-Pacific region. As I said before, both countries wanting to have keep open the sea lanes of communication in the South China Sea, in the Indian Ocean region. And the one big thing which is to the advantage of India and Japan, Archit, is that both countries do not have outstanding bilateral disputes like the one which both have with China. So, to my mind, and as we've been discussing here on Beyond this afternoon, China is the proverbial elephant in the room, and it'll be interesting to see how China watches the ongoing visit of Prime Minister Abe here in Ahmedabad today. But that said, just as an aside, Archit, very quickly, a lot of comparisons being made here this afternoon between this visit and that by President Xi Jinping to Ahmedabad in 2014. But we've seen that in the last 3 years, India-China relations have plummeted, a decline in relative terms, especially in the light of the Doklam standoff.
Right.
But in contrast, India-Japan relations are getting better, bigger and stronger by the day.
Well, we also want to point out that Japan was one of the few countries, in fact, that did support India during that standoff at the Doklam Plateau between India and China that lasted more than 2 months. Could we perhaps sense that this was a premonition because India and Japan were going to be meeting for this inaugural bullet train launch? Was that perhaps a reason, or have things always been strong between India and Japan as far as China is concerned?
Well, to begin with, Archit, Japan was the only country of consequence that came out openly in support of India's position on the standoff on the Doklam Plateau, which concerned India, Bhutan and China. To my mind, that is no less significant than all the other issues that are and will be on Prime Minister Modi's agenda when he sits down for talks with Prime Minister Abe.
We also know that both the Japanese Prime Minister will be treated to a traditional Gujarati thali as well, so certainly that's going to be interesting to see. And of course, all of this on a lighter note does come as perhaps a reciprocation after Japan hosted Modi, back in the past, so back in November of 2016 to be exact. How important is this in terms of the global community to see this, to see India and Japan's relationship when it comes to this project, its trade deals, and what we talked about when it comes to the situation with China? How will this look from a global perspective?
Well, clearly, Archit, all eyes will be on the ongoing visit of Prime Minister Abe to India for the 12th annual summit. And as I said before, India and Japan's relationship extends beyond the bilateral and regional realm. And it is becoming a key factor of stability in the wider global context. As I said, both countries are looking to stamp their own fortunes, as it were, on the world map, especially in the UN Security Council, where they are seeking membership. And India and Japan also are partnering in third countries, namely the African continent, where India and Japan are collaborating in capacity building, in urban infrastructure, and sustainable development projects. So clearly, the bilateral, regional, and global dimensions, all three of the India-Japan relationship is there for all to see. And I'm sure China would be closely monitoring and watching the developments here in Ahmadabad this afternoon, and the warm hug that both leaders gave each other soon upon landing in Ahmadabad. Remember, Prime Minister Modi, as I said, insists and invests a great deal of time, effort in establishing personal rapport with world leaders, and the chemistry between the two leaders was there for all to see just moments ago when they met each other at the airport here in Ahmedabad.
All right, Ramesh, we'll have you stand there. Also going to bring in Pramit Pal Chowdhury as well into the conversation. Pramit, great to have you, sir, again on the program. My question to you is, when it comes to this relationship between India and Japan, certainly, we've seen Modi meet many world leaders, in fact, this year alone, but India's neighbor China, at this point, Beijing says they are welcoming the infrastructure and the cooperation between the two countries, but are they watching this with a close sense of, close eye, noticing that India and Japan is perhaps bonding more than Beijing would like it to?
No, definitely. I think the Chinese will have reason to be concerned. They know that Japan has ultimately made it very clear that a lot of what they are doing in India, in terms of building the industrial corridors, the bullet trains, encouraging the Japanese companies to invest in India. Japanese firms are now the third largest source of FDI in the country and growing rapidly. A lot of that is designed to make India a economically and politically much more powerful nation in Asia, and the idea obviously would be to provide some ballast against China's dominance of mainland Asia. And the Japanese have been very clear on that front, and so the Chinese know that every time Abe and Modi meet and they announce another set of projects,
right,
this is obviously going to help. The other part of it is India's support, diplomatically and morally, for the remilitarization of Japan. Abe has called for making Japan a normal country and ending the post-war pacifism of the past. And India has made it clear that while many other Asian countries may look upon this with concern, India has no problems and therefore holds major naval exercises with Japan, both in the Pacific and in the Indian Ocean, and has talked about, they're still trying to work that out, but the idea of actually beginning to be the first buyer of Japanese arms exports since World War II. All of this is designed to make Japan again a military nation, and that obviously is a zero-sum game as far as China is concerned.
Pramit Pal, let me also ask you, when it comes to defense ties between India and Japan, how important is this going to pan out perhaps in these talks during the time when Modi and Shinzo Abe meet together, given the imminent threat with what is happening with North Korea's nuclear ambitions? Are they likely to touch upon that, or do we think that because of this agenda it really will be focusing more on the economic trade with the bullet train launch? Pramit Pal.
Yeah, I think that, yes, we'll see. There has already been talk about us buying certain types of Japanese weapons, the US-2 seaplane, even though that will be largely for humanitarian purposes. But after the North Korea incidents, the continuing problems with China by both India and Japan, and both of them have experienced, what the talk now is saying, can we move into co-production and co-development of specific weapon systems? A Japanese parliamentarian, Mr. Kasai from Hiroshima, was recently in Delhi, and he has a position as special advisor on foreign affairs to Prime Minister Abe. And he, in the public audience in India, said that, look, one of the things Japan needs now, given the North Korean situation, is a missile system. Japan has no offensive missile capacity. And India, however, has all four varieties: ICBMs, IRBMs, short-range missiles, as well as cruise missiles. And he said it struck him that this is an obvious area where India and Japan could collaborate. Japan, on the other hand, has some of the world's best conventional submarines. It already has a fifth-generation fighter prototype in the air. And again, these are things that India is looking for. So he says there's an obvious match here that's developing.
Right.
All that requires is for these countries to slowly work out how exactly they should do these things.
All right, we'll stand by there, Pramod Pal. We'll come back to you in a bit. Let me also bring in Swaran Singh, a professor from JNU, joining us on this. Let's stay on this topic about, what we may expect the talks to sort of encompass between these two leaders, India and Japan, Modi and Shinzo Abe. Will it focus strictly on the economic implications, or perhaps other topics, including defense ties, may be brought up on the agenda as well? What do you think?
As you can see that India-Japan bonhomie and partnership is evolving at several levels.
Right.
You can see the road show that was a clear demonstration of the warm chemistry that two leaders share, and that they have met 10 times by now. And I think that personal chemistry is what reassures that initiatives at different levels would be coming to fruition. And a couple of areas which I think are really upfront to notice is the shift lately towards nuclear cooperation and defense cooperation. And you can understand that for a long time, Japan had a ban on exporting weapons and weapons technologies, which was lifted in 2014. And that's a major watershed in building the collaborations with India. And we are going to get perhaps amphibious planes, which have been under negotiations for about 7 years now. We could be getting those 12, I think, for Indian Navy. And also in case of civilian nuclear cooperation again, where we were waiting for a really long time, and Japan, being the victim of a nuclear attack, was a country which is difficult to sort of encourage nuclear cooperation. And then, of course, they had Fukushima in 2011, which again put our negotiations to a halt. But finally, in July this year, the agreement has finally become operational. That is also going to have positive impact on India's nuclear partnership in building power reactors from Westinghouse, which was also held up because Westinghouse is owned by Toshiba. And then, of course, I think this Asia-Africa growth corridor, which is at a regional and global level initiative of India and Japan, that is also going to be an important signal of them not only taking their bilateral partnership forward, but also beginning to take initiatives at regional and global level. So I think several levels have to be noticed, where you can have business-to-business relationship, you could have infrastructure projects in terms of bullet trains being started, in terms of projects being built and other projects being negotiated. But at the core of it, I think, is the bonhomie and chemistry that is noticeable of two leaders, and they are really willing to take the relationship forward.
All right, let me bring in Ramesh there. Swaran Singh, thank you. We'll come back to you in a bit. Let me bring in Ramesh. They're on the ground in Gujarat and Ahmadabad. What is the mood like there, Ramesh? It's been a good hour now since since Shinzo Abe has arrived there. We see them live at the ashram there, the Sabarmati ashram. Certainly a short trip, but a packed agenda. What's the mood like there on the ground, and what do we expect to happen over the coming days? Ramesh. All right, we'll come back to Ramesh. He's unfortunately not able to get him. Let me go to Pramod Pal Chowdhury, also joining us. The bullet train certainly high on the agenda when it comes to how India could sort of leverage what is happening in terms of the technology that Japan is so well known for. Could we perhaps see this expand to other cities, in your opinion? This specific one between Gujarat and Maharashtra, Mumbai and Ahmedabad, could this be expanded to other parts of the country as well? What do you think?
Definitely, that's exactly the plan. The idea right now is that Western India tends to be a better place or a more advanced place to actually carry out infrastructure building. So that's why they focused on Western India, Gujarat and Maharashtra being two states where it's much easier to do business than, let's say, more densely populated Eastern India or Northern India. But the idea is very clear on two fronts. One, the Japanese in their own internal assessments have said that the main thing that they see holding back India economically is the lack of infrastructure. So they have invested heavily in the industrial corridor, the Delhi metro system, and then the super fast train. The bullet train idea was the next step, where they said that, look, right now what is happening is your railway system is falling behind your population growth. People are moving to airplanes in India to move between larger cities. But you actually need both, given the size of your population and where your economy is going. You need to have high-speed trains between medium-range cities and airplanes as well. So that's the next stage that you've got to move into. It's also designed, the second part of it, and Indian officials have told me this, is that it's also designed to get over a mindset problem that both Indians and the rest of the world have regarding India, which is a sense that India cannot build 21st century infrastructure. That, oh, you've still got bullock carts, you still have all of these other things. Therefore, you can't really be jumping to bullet trains. And that is another mindset that Japan and the Indian government together want to break, to show that we can actually do this. When the Delhi Metro was first announced, it was felt that it was not going to be possible to build. When the first large airports, modern airports were created here, it was also deemed unlikely to function. When cell phones were first introduced into India, when they went mobile, there was this argument that since we don't even have landlines across the country, what is the point of us going mobile? So that mindset issue is something that they want to break. And the point is that, you know, everybody says we can't afford it, but look at the timeline. They're looking at a 50-year period, actually 65-year period before the loans have to be fully paid off. If we double our GDP every 8 or 9 years, which is considered easily feasible at that 6 to 7% growth, by the time in 65 years, we should be a $20 trillion, $25 trillion economy, in which case paying this off will not only be very easy for us, by then we should be able to afford a full network of national bullet trains.
All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time for this bulletin, but we want to thank both of our guests, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, as well as Swaran Singh, and of course our correspondent Ramesh Ramachandran, getting you ground updates. That does it for this bulletin. WION World is One News. We'll continue tracking Shinzo Abe and Prime Minister Modi's meet over the next 2 days. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Archit Seshadri. WION World is next.